Hey San Spacon, I'm Daisy Viktoria, and welcome to an exploration of ancient pharaonic Egypt, specifically the clothing. This video is going to focus on my experimentation with trying to study and recreate some of the clothing worn in ancient Egypt. This is based on as much archaeological evidence as possible, combined with my experimentation of trying the garments, wearing them, and seeing what works. I am a member of the Society for Creative Anachronism, which is a historic reenactment group. In this group, you can reenact anything up through the Renaissance. And for a long time, I've been part of this movement to bring more study of ancient Egypt into the society. We definitely have a growing group of pharaonic Egyptian reenactors, and everyone has different sort of focuses. For me, it's the clothing. That's kind of my primary, no matter what era I'm looking at. And since that is what this channel is about, that is what we'll be focusing on. If you have an interest in other aspects or you want to dive deeper into just the history, there are plenty of groups where you can connect with other SCA members. You can also find groups to connect with Egyptologists and people who work in and around the region to excavate artifacts. There's so much out there for ancient Egypt, and I think that's really, really cool. What there's not a lot of out there is actual existing extant clothing. Now there is some, which is pretty freaking awesome because, I mean, this was thousands of years ago, and yet there is still some cloth that has survived all that time in some of the tombs that have been excavated. So there's a little bit to base this on in addition to the drawings. I'm going to present you with my inspirations and what I've come up with through my experiments and wearing some of these garments. And you can take from this what you like. If you just want entertainment, welcome. If you have some other purpose for recreating ancient Egyptian clothing, I hope this will give you some ideas and at least some sort of reference or starting point for your own project. Because I am a very feminine person, you might imagine that I'm looking at the female garments primarily. I have looked at male garments somewhat for my male friends, so I will include a little bit of that as well. I've done a lot of experimentation with female clothing for myself, and we're gonna go through that first. When you look at pharaonic Egypt, that is ancient Egypt prior to the conquering by Rome, the fashion doesn't really change that much. Consider this as thousands of years. Our fashion changes every season now, but it really looks very similar throughout time. So we're gonna kind of take a general look for the sake of exploring how things function. When you think of ancient Egypt, you probably think of the sheath dress worn by women. This is also called a kalasiris. The sheath dress has some variation, and it's kind of a mystery how it's exactly put together, but I have been experimenting with some ideas. By the way, I also want to mention that the clothing in ancient Egypt was primarily made of linen. There are some animal skins and things that have been found primarily for special ritualistic clothing or robes. So if you're going for like a general fiber type that's appropriate, linen is your go-to for all of these clothes. So the very first sheath dress I made was kind of to look like the paintings. I know the paintings are not completely accurate to real life, so that's something to account for as well. Whenever you're using the tomb art or papyrus art or whatever for reference, note that there's a very distinct style in this artwork. So while you can trust that it's giving you an idea of what things looked like, you can't really say it's 100% accurate. As we can tell, for example, the jewelry is way more detailed in real life than in these drawings, just based on the jewelry that we've found. So for my first sheath dress, I was trying to go for the look of the paintings. And what I did was I created a fitted body tube And then I created straps that went from the underbust in front to the back. I made these straps supportive and I made the dress very tight. So that way I could have full support in this dress, and it really did look like the paintings. This dress laces up in the back, and while I think it is probably the best way to kind of look like the paintings while having a modernly acceptable dress with support, it's also not the easiest dress to wear because it's got that back lacing, right? So I love this dress. I made one in white. I also made one in red. The red one, I was primarily inspired by tomb paintings of the goddess Nut, who typically is shown wearing a red sheath dress and a cat or afnet headdress. I will get more into the headdresses in another video all about the head coverings. And I love these two dresses. I've worn them a bunch. They work pretty well, but they're not accurate. Like, we haven't found anything that really looks like these dresses. They're just a sort of middle ground, right, between looking like the painting and having something that works for me now. So I wanted to explore things a bit further and try to go a little bit more accurate. The oldest known dresses that we have uncovered in ancient Egypt are very rectangular in construction. These dresses have long sleeves, but I can use that as support to conjecture how the sheath dress could have been made. So we often have representations of sheath dresses in art that we can't wear out in the modern world due to modesty regulations. There are some that are in fact appropriate, and these dresses tend to fully cover the bust, so that is what I was going for in my next interpretations. For these dresses, it's a body tube, so one of them is actually a straight up and down body tube, and then straight rectangles up over the shoulders, just like in that original dress that was found. And this works very well. You have to belt it, otherwise it's just a huge sack, right? So I did another interpretation of this as well, where I tapered in the sides of the dress, and I also tapered the shoulders. I still found that the shoulders were a little wide, so tying them together at the top kind of gave me an even smaller look for the shoulders. And this is actually what I have in my PDF tutorial, is this type of dress. I think this one is the easiest to make and wear sort of that good combination. And there's one alteration to this that I made recently that I'm going to show you. We're going kind of in chronological order here of like how I experimented. So I'll show you that modification too, but this is basically the best of all worlds, I think. It's conjecturally accurate from what we do have. It's easy to make, it's easy to wear, it's comfy, and it's great for hot weather. So pretty freaking ideal. My next experiment was based on the fact that we think a lot of these dresses were actually just wrapped pieces of cloth. So I made a big piece of cloth. Well, I didn't make the cloth, I bought the cloth, but I hemmed a big piece of cloth. And I did that based on the measurements of a cloth found in a tomb. And I decided to go ahead and put a drawstring at the top to help me tie it on. What I also made to go with this version is a sort of bra top. This is made using the same top that I used for the other dresses, and I did that for my comfort because I just wanted that support and also the modesty, right? So I looked at some pharaonic statues that had sort of this harness looking thing, and I used trim to be inspired by that to make something I could use to make this modernly appropriate. So I went ahead and did that, and this one, I like the look of it a lot, but it's a little bit finicky with the drawstring the way it's in there. I've tried tying the drawstring over the shoulders in different ways, and really you don't need a drawstring, right? You could just wrap fabric and tie it over your shoulders or what have you, and that is an option, though I personally prefer the prior one better because it's a little bit easier to manage. but I really do love the look of this one. I also made a plain bra top that I could wear underneath the prior versions that I showed you, and that's again for my own comfort. I made it out of a linen that was pretty close to my skin color, so that way it's effectively not really that noticeable. Obviously, you could wear a regular bra under these if you like that too. Continuing on, I wanted to actually do a different sheath dress that was accurate to the artwork, but I knew that I couldn't really wear in real life. So for this dress, I created just a tube and I slid it up in the back for ease of walking, and I'm doing that with all the tube dresses because I like to have a full range of movement. I split it up to my knees every time I make one of these. So this one, I put 2 straps going from the center of the front over the shoulders to the back. Obviously not modernly appropriate, but we can make it modernly appropriate by adding this sort of wrap piece. Now my wrap piece is sort of faux pleated by bunching up the fabric and rolling it on itself and then storing it that way. So initially I got it wet too to kind of set this pleating or scrunching, and then I stored it and it maintains that sort of pleated look. That's in lieu of actually doing all the pleating. This is just an experiment. I don't know if I'm gonna keep wearing it, so I wanted to experiment with the fit of it before experimenting with, you know, going through the pleating. And this is something they could have done, who knows. Wrapping this piece of fabric on, I did a method where I tied it in the front and then I have belted it. I do really like the look of this. I think it looks a lot like so many of the statues. We see a plethora of statues and images of women wearing this type of wrap, tied different ways, sometimes with 1 sleeve, sometimes with 2 sleeves. There's all different ways you could tie it. I'm only tying it here over both shoulders because of modesty purposes. I wanted to make sure I was covered. All in all, I do think this is a really cool style. And I think if you play with the size and length of that piece of fabric that's wrapped over, I think it could be really cool. In my opinion, it's a little bit fussy to wear. If I'm going to a camping event and I'm gonna do an Egyptian persona, I'm probably not gonna opt for this one. I may bring it along just in case, but for the most part, I'm gonna go for the easier ones because when I'm at an event, I am focused on more things than just dressing up all day, right? Like I'm focused on going and hanging out with my friends and going and doing all the various activities that are available on site. So while I want to look my best, I also want a combination of the look and ease of function, right? So if I can figure out how to make this one a little bit easier, maybe with the size of that wrap piece of fabric, maybe with something else, this becomes an option. However, I am still dealing with an underdress that is not socially acceptable nowadays. So another solution to this wrap could be wearing the wrap over the other style dress I showed you, where it's sort of the over the whole bust and shoulders look. So I think you could just do the wrap over that one and voila, problem solved. Now it's not so finicky, now it's a little bit easier. So now we get into my current favorite of the sheath dress kalasiris experiments. So remember the ones where I had it as just a straight tube, straight up and down with the 2 pieces from underbust to underbust, basically front to back, based on those excavated dresses from the Old Kingdom and adapted to look like some of the statues. So this dress is great, but it needs a belt. What I decided to do is to put a drawstring under the bust. So that is my modification to the original pattern or the PDF tutorial that I also have on my website. Here I've simply added a drawstring. So when I sewed these dresses, I folded over that tube and made a seam for the drawstring first, and then I attached the shoulder pieces. And when I did this, I found that I didn't need to actually sew them up the sides or the underarms. so I just left them as the two big, rectangles. And you can obviously connect them at the sides. If you want more modesty in the front, you could sew that up a little bit. Those are modifications you can do for your comfort level. This is simply like an idea interpreting the artwork and archaeological evidence that we have and trying to make it work for us. This one is my favorite because I can wear this with or without a belt and it still is super comfy and fits great. This is kind of the best of all worlds, I think, when it comes to wearing a sheath dress for me personally. You can tie the straps together at the top or you can leave them as sort of short sleeves, and the drawstring allows you to gather it in under the bust, and it's so comfy as is. Adding the belt, still so comfy. This is the easiest dress, in my opinion, to put on and wear for an event. Rivaled only by the version without a drawstring, which you just need a belt for. So I think that this is the one I will primarily go to for my own personal wardrobe for reenactment. And that means I'll be trying more with the drapery of the wrap dress on top of this one as well, because that gives you a great option to go from the heat of the day into the evening when it cools down. Having something to wrap over your shoulders is a great idea. Now let's not forget about the men. I have done less experimentation on the men's clothing than the women's clothing, but I'm going to show you some really easy ideas to get started on this as well. Now we see men in Egyptian artwork most commonly wearing the loincloth and the kilt or schenti. I do have another video on my experimentation with trying to get the schenti to look like it does in artwork and in some of the supported archaeological evidence of loincloths, and I will link to that. Basically, the loincloth is a big triangle of fabric. It could be shaped a little bit differently in the front, but that's kind of like your base shape, right? And then the schenti, I think, is probably just a tied rectangle of cloth, but I tried shaping it to make it kind of look like the portraits, and the men I've made these for that have worn them have very much liked that because it's easy to wear. It's kind of a not much fuss outfit versus tying a whole piece of fabric. But I do want to mention that most likely these are tied rectangles, so that's something that we can kind of experiment with as well. Now, women did also wear loincloths as underwear, just to put that out there. So if you want to go for historical accuracy representation, you can also try that under the kalasiris. Another thing that I've tried for the menswear is the tunic. This is really, really simple. So this is actually just a big rectangle with a hole cut out for the neck, and the sides are not sewn all the way up, so they're open for the arms to come through. This is so easy. This is basically the easiest tunic style that you can make. This is not only found in Egypt, but in other regions around the world as well. I've seen these in museum exhibits from various places, and I think that it's just really easy, okay? Like, if you're trying to get into reenactment, it's literally the easiest thing you can probably make, aside from maybe the Greek and Roman stuff, which is just rectangles. This tunic is inspired by one found in King Tut's tomb. King Tut's tunic, the fabric was so amazing. Like, we don't even weave fabric to the quality that this fabric was. They actually had to reproduce it specially in Borås, Sweden, and they created a recreation of this tunic using that specially made fabric. So this one is me experimenting with a similar looking fabric with the stripes to see how this tunic looks and functions. Let me tell you, it is so comfy. This is probably actually the most comfortable of all the outfits that I've made for ancient Egypt. I did make this tunic for my boyfriend to wear, but to be honest, I might steal it for myself because I really like it. With this tunic, I am wearing a nemes, which is another head covering. I'll show you in another video more detail about that. The nemes is something that was also associated to King Tut, so it's kind of a whole look here. And the jewelry I will also talk more about in another video where I attempt to recreate one of these broad collars. So the broad collar is something that really is iconically ancient Egypt. You see it so ubiquitously throughout Egyptian artwork, tomb paintings, statues all over the place. You also see a lot of other necklaces and bracelets and earrings and just all kinds of really cool jewelry. Ancient Egyptians loved their jewelry. So we will get into that a little bit more in that video so that you can fully accessorize the ancient Egyptian look that you are looking at, whether you're trying to recreate it or just study it. If you enjoyed what you've seen here today, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you see everything I post here. Find me on all the social medias as Daisy Viktoria. My website is daisyviktoria.com. And thank you so much to my patrons over on Patreon who help me so much to continue creating content like this, as well as tutorials and progress photos and write-ups and all kinds of cool stuff that I share over there as well. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day and your week and your weekend. Do something that makes you happy and remember to give yourself kindness. I hope you have an absolutely magical day, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.